your job posting. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to set up the problem. So present the problem or express it so that the proposition is implied. We should know where you're going in your introduction without having to come out and say it. This doesn't mean that I don't want you to say it, like, ooh, leave it elusive. No, eventually we're going to get around to stating our thesis or this proposition, but really make sure that we're getting what part of this you are arguing. So if in any time you're like, what is this about? That's when you know that you haven't done a good job at presenting the problem and guiding us on our way. We should know essentially where we're going. I also want you to sketch the background on the problem. And if necessary, you can review some of the literature on it. I like to think about where do you want to be in the conversation. This debate that you are involved in right now has clearly been going on since when? Since like September? No. It's been going on for years, and in some cases, hundreds of years. And it's been existent in our society for quite some time. So you're joining in on the conversation. You're staking your point, and you're staking your moment to be a part of this conversation that's been continuously going on. So if you wanted to review some of the literature that's been brought out or any of the information that you've come across before, you can always do that in your presentation of the problem as well. So even if you wanted to discuss, like, research has been done on this for like centuries, and then you could like cite the specific research that's been, like, who's been doing it. And each of them have concluded that blank is the contributing factor. That would be an easy way to go about it. But you're also going to want to tell us why this problem has been a problem, or why previous attempts or policies or laws have failed to solve it. We'll get around to how that comes out a bit quicker, or a bit more in detail. And you also want to mention what benefits are to be gained from solving this problem. Think about that idea of social justice. Like, what are the benefits of doing this? How is this going to benefit society? By being able to implement a policy, this will potentially do what? And I know that you're going to talk about how it's going to solve those problems. That's essentially what you're going to be doing in your third main point. But in general, what is this going to start to provide for us in society? So then after you kind of like set us up and get us going, and this is what the topic is looking like, and here is the issue, then we can narrow it down and we can focus it. And this is where you can present your actual purpose or your proposition. And in writing, we call this the thesis. So remember, the claim and the topic and the reason all equal your thesis. Absolutely. So this is where you're going to present your thesis. And each of you have that, right? This is not where you put your main points. Okay, this is simply you suggesting what this is going to look like. Now, we're not going to say today, I'm going to persuade you that, because that's something that you would do if an audience was in front of you. So instead, we have to start to create the language, and that's why I told you just take that part off, to persuade my audience that, because we know that that's what your end goal is. It's a really easy trick to make it into a statement, a declarative statement that you are going to prove, rather than having all that intro. The other thing that you will want to accomplish in your introduction is you're going to want to lay out a little bit of background on your policy or plan. So in that first step where it says, tell why this problem has been a problem and or why previous attempts or policies, that's what you may want to do. So like, here's this and here's how we're going to solve it. Again, there isn't an actual, like, first you do this, give you your attention getter. Then you do this, then you do this. Your attention getter will go first. And how you start to reveal that topic is how you think about it. It's the same thing like that you've been doing in this speech. You'll give some background information. You'll reveal what this topic is about. You'll draw us to the actual purpose of what you're doing. You may, in this case, talk about the policy at hand. So this is the problem that exists and what it's not doing. The suggestion is to take on this plan or this policy, and you can give us a bit of background if you wanted to. Note that you will be able to get into like the actual specifics specifics of the plan and of the policy, either in your first couple paragraphs or in the solution, if you will, the last paragraph of your paper. But you're more than welcome to lay out a couple of ideas as to how you think it's going to help resolve in your introduction. You also want to give any detail that we may need to know to accept your plan by the end of the paper. So let's say that it's like, nope, we have to, I'm trying to think of like how that would be. If we're going to be talking about our plan throughout each of our problem paragraphs, you may want to focus more time in your introduction of describing the plan so that when we go through it, people are more inclined to like start to see, ooh, yes, that sounds interesting. Oh, look, I see how that's going to resolve that problem. That is wonderful and mighty. But you may need to give a brief overview and context of where this policy is now as well. And what I say about that is, I said the context. Has it been used before, but it didn't work? Why didn't it work then, and why is this the perfect time to do it now? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Does it have to be in our intro? Can we talk about it when we're talking about the solution?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say hold off completely, like, woohoo, guess what I'm doing? No, you should give a little bit of your introduction, like, this was the policy, this is, right now, this is the policy that's going on, and here's the policy that I'd like to put into action because that one is no longer working. We want to establish that something is outdated, that it's no longer working, that it's out of turn, that it doesn't target the people that it needs to, that it's simply an old idea or a value that no longer exists. It's like the idea of guns in the Second Amendment. I'm all for like upholding the Second Amendment. I think that guns need reform. I think that the Second Amendment is, in for my opinion, I think it is out of date. Why? Because firearms have changed so much. It doesn't make any sense anymore the way that it was written. We're not necessarily like protecting our land and using muskets. How many of you have had a gun in your house your whole life? One person. And all of us are still here. And we've probably gone through a lot of trials and tribulations and not had to pull out that one. Like, it's not like the either or, this idea that like either you have your gun or you will die because somebody will come. There's this lot of this, you want to take away my right to protect myself? Like, I haven't had a protecting of myself in almost 40 years. And thank the good Lord above, I'm very lucky because I acknowledge all the places of the privilege that I live in my life. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, like, we're getting by. Okay, not everybody needs to be slinging a gun in their front yard. Everybody's so scared of it. Rhetoric. That's what they're scared of. So in conclusion, does that make sense? Like, where's the context of it? So we can present that it was out of date, but this plan now is more relevant, more up to date, and could be applied because society is more likely to adhere to the idea at a time when same-sex marriage is being accepted all over the world. We don't want to be left out, something like that. Does that make sense? All right. Easy. And then you'll give your summary or overview of the paper. So this is the forecasting of your main ideas or your main points of what you're going to cover. In this case, it is laid out as a problem, cause, solution order. You are first going to establish the current problems that exist under this policy. You will then discuss the reasons as to why this policy exists. And finally, you will lay out clear solutions that will handle the problem.
Why the policy that's in place now exists, or the one that you want to change the policy?
Which, what part were you talking about?
You were saying that you're first going to establish a problem, and then you're going to say why this policy.
Yeah, so first, we're going to establish that there is a problem with the current policy. So what are the problems that are existing out of that current policy? Because of what's going on right now, this is the problem. And all of us have, in essence, established already what your problems are. Have you not? Because you did that in your first main point. You already know what the problems.
So we're not saying what the problem of the policy is. We're saying, like, in general, this is the problem, and this is why there is a policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, because this policy is here, these problems have come about.
Okay.
You finally get to reason with your information in a way that, like, those steps when you're like, this is the stereotype and this is what happens. Now you get to take it to the next step and be like, so this is the stereotype, not just like how much it's going on or where it's presented, but this is the stereotype, this is how much it's presented, and when it is, these are the kind of detrimental problems and effects that it causes, and thus we need to do something about it. That's essentially how the argument will go. Does that make sense? So if the policy as is doesn't protect people's rights, when it doesn't protect people's rights, individuals are more likely to commit the crime. When they're more likely to commit the crime, more sexual assault happens, and thus we are perpetuating a vicious circle. Does that make sense? So you can go about it in that way. You can also don't have to break down particular parts of the policy if that's not it. But many of you as well, there is nothing in place. So like, for example, like Hannah, there's not a lot in place right now, I believe, for hers. I don't know if that's true or not. So if there's never been anything in place and you're putting something in place, I mean, that's the problem in general. And so like, what's going on in society that there isn't something in place? So that's where you could talk about the specifics without even having to really mention the policy. Does that make sense? Some type of flaw, though, has allowed us to get to this point. So you can 100% forecast your paper and thesis by outlining the structure of your paper as we do in the speech. Okay, so you can, if you wanted to, talk about, like, this paper will seek to. How many of you ever did that when you were writing back in the day? Okay, so in your old writing ways, how would you forecast main points?
Yeah, they were the second part of the thesis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you put them together.
Yeah, it can be 1 or 2 sentences.
Okay, great. I'm happy with you doing either. Typically, you can separate them. If you're more comfortable putting them together, I'm as happy as a clam with you doing it. Where would it fall if you combine them together? Okay, fantastic. Yes, you should. Isn't that fun? You should eat more pizza. But you should eat more pizza because we need a claim, right? What's the proposition? You should eat more pizza. Okay. Should be a reason that we grounded it. Yes, right? We should eat more pizza because it serves the most nutritional benefit for the cheapest bang for your buck. So, if you want to combine it all, where do you put it in the introduction? Is it right at the end?
So typically you have like an attention getter, and then you like
Reveal the topic, and then
exactly.
it's like just exact, and it's all at the very end. So you are more than welcome to do it exactly how we do it in the speech, if you want to. Okay, you can put it all together, and you can do it just how we do it in the speech, in that way, and you can literally lay out the words. You can also very easily go ahead and separate them if you want to try that. So acknowledging the thesis as simply the claim, topic, reason in your reveal topic portion. And then by the time you get to the end, you can suggest the main points and what this entire paper is going to lay out. That by the time one looks through the severe problems generated from the policies that exist today and are able to clearly understand how the existing mentalities that put this policy into structure are outdated, you will, one can arrive at the sound decision to implement the policy of blah, 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 right? So however you want to go about this problem, cause, solution. But again, if you wanted to work on the informal use of writing and speaking, you can use the more formal tone to accomplish the goal. You could also come right out and say it. Most people do not like this way of writing your main points also. I'm okay with it, but this paper begins by laying out 3 major problems with the policy at hand. To provide a thorough explanation of these problems, opposing viewpoints will are discussed. The paper will close with ideas for taking actions and possible directions for future policy enactment. You see how this is your problem, cause, solution structure? Okay, this is the preview. Oh my God, is this just the time of day? Are you all like, Amanda, you're talking about writing. It's not that fun. Just the ladder.
8 a.m. lab.
What?
8 a.m. lab just has you all
It's been a
screwed
long
up.
week. I think it's like the week after like midterms. They're just
Like, oh gosh, we have to start all this again?
Yeah.
We have to do this all again before I start back up? All right, easy enough. So let's move forward. So we've gone through these, through the introduction. So you know how an introduction goes. Attention getter, revealing the topic. You can include the thesis in that if you want. Give us some background information on the policy, should we need it. Suggested the policy plan and how it will go. And then finally we can preview the main points and where we're going to go in this entire paper. But each body should start with a topic sentence. So in contrast to where the speech would assume that it's body paragraph 1 are all of your problems listed in that. Main point 2 has all of your causes, and main point 3 has your solutions. It is suggested that for this paper, we instead make each of our problems a paragraph on their own. So that's why the structure, if you see at the top, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, or problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, each of these are indicating different paragraphs for you. Does that make sense? So if you see even in the formatting, let's see, turn to page 3, you'll see that your body paragraphs will each have like a topic sentence, and then this one has something for the rebuttal, and then a conclusion. But each of the boxes indicate a different paragraph. And typically you switch paragraphs when you switch ideas. So if one concept has 2 within it, we can always talk about like where that goes. But otherwise, it's a good rule to keep in mind. So each body paragraph is going to start with a topic sentence. And in essence, this is going to transition the reader into understanding what you're going to be focusing on within that paragraph. And everything within that paragraph should support that point or that particular problem. So this sentence will clearly communicate what the paragraph will be covering. The topic sentence may or may not restate your thesis or position, but should always state the paragraph's central argument. Right? So like establishing the problem. One of the major problems, or you know, you can put it in different ways. Migrant farm workers today are experiencing fear from speaking out like they never have before. Now I know that that paragraph is going to be about the fear of speaking out and what types of like problems that leads to. Does that make sense? So you can put it in a couple of different ways, or you could do the simple like, you can utilize the words, and I'm fine with that, like the to begin. Let's start off, let's pick up, let's examine, right? So you can use it in different ways. Write topic sentences that are clear, that are direct and upfront about your purpose. So ensure that the statement that you are suggesting is in fact what you are going to be covering. So recall, if you will, the structure that we did. Recall, if you will, the structure that we did when we were doing the formatting. Do you remember this? Yeah, okay, good. So remember that within now, these main points are going to be, in essence, your what? Topic sentence. And these are going to be the major claims of the problems if you have the A, the B, and the C. So for your example on Tuesday, and what I want you to present to me, I'm looking for you to be able to at least write a topic sentence for each paragraph that you have. which I think is pretty easy to accomplish. All it means is that you need to establish which problems that you want to talk about. And in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest the maximum amount of problems that you speak about is 3 problems that exist. You can have 2, between 2 and 3 problems. If there's only 1 problem, it makes it seem like that may not be a worthy topic to look at. Not that I'm not saying it's not like good enough, but when we only say that there's like 1 problem, there has to be more than like 1 issue that's coming out of this. So this is where we need to really establish that if we're going to do anything else. So within each of these, make sure that you are writing your topic sentence. Does everybody feel comfortable with writing a topic sentence since essentially you did it with our speech? Sure. I mean, so do you know your problems yet? Let's say we go back to the idea of like, I don't know. Water. If I'm telling you to drink water, what are the problems with not drinking water? Okay. Is dehydration the problem? It's usually like what comes along with, because like right now I'm super thirsty, which to me tells me that I'm already what? Dehydrated. So like when you're thirsty, they tell you that you're already low on the water. But I'm still walking around, right? Am I functioning as well that I could? No, absolutely. So this is a good thing too, is that we really want to make sure that like our problems are representative of what we're talking about. Like, is this a problem? Is that what you're speaking about? So if dehydration is our main point that we're going to talk about, of not drinking water, what's a great way to set up that entire paragraph? We know that we want to establish it as being a problem. We know that with dehydration comes a lot of what? What can come with when you're dehydrated? Yeah, what are those? You get tired. Your digestive system doesn't work as well. You get a headache. There's a possibility of screwing up your what? You're right. Electrolytes. Right. When we screw up our electrolytes, it messes with like our temperature, our focus, our everything. Right. It can really go down with water. We need it. So these are many effects that happen to us. What? Long. Okay, good. They can be short term. They can also be long term. Ooh, that's a fun thing to think about. Short term effects of dehydration, long term effects. But also they happen where? Okay, so if I wanted to lay out that dehydration causes major problems within the body that can be both short term and long term, how would I say that? I just kind of did. Thanks, everybody. What? Yeah, didn't I? I know. So the thing that we want to know about before writing our topic sentence, and to write an effective topic sentence, much like an introduction, is you need to know what your what is about. Paragraph, good. You have to know what that paragraph is going to be about, what it's going to entail, what types of issues it's going to cover, so that you can synthesize that first sentence in an effective way that really gives you an idea and an overview as to what we're looking at. You can make it as simple as, let's first look, one problem that exists out of not drinking water. Dehydration can become a major problem for those who do not drink enough water, specifically the numerous health repercussions. Does that make sense? So you can do it in that way, or you can talk about the short term, long term, but it really depends on what you're going to have within that main point that will determine that topic sentence. So it's just simply the first sentence of your of your work. So the last time, did I write anything in there on that? And I can't even give you. Oh, well here, let's look at the example. Why was I coming up with one when you were like, Amanda, you wrote one? So the red indicates the proposition, which you can do, and the blue claim, the claim that will be covered in the paragraph. So let's just say like whatever legislature, like we can talk about the policy if you wanted to. So like your policy is, what is it called? The SAFE Act needs to be repealed because its current state only creates more crime. So maybe in this case then I'm going to be talking about how it's creating one. The major problem is that the policy as it exists is creating more what?
More problems.
Yeah, what's the problem? Is it dehydration? No, it's right there. It's crime, everybody. It's crime. Good. Okay, so that's what it's causing. I laid it right out. What is the problem? One of the major problems is that individuals aren't going to college. What is it? Like, what's one of the major problems that you think was going to come out of yours?
They're not.
What were the main points of your last presentation? Isn't this funny? I know, right? Okay. Jose, what were your problems? You think? What's the problem with these individuals not having any rights? Right now as it exists, why are these people, these migrant farm workers, like what are their issues?
They suffer through like health hazards.
Okay! Health hazards. So we can say it as simply as, and what are those health hazards? Pesticides and...
Pesticides, being out in heat without any like time off.
Yeah, right?
Their living conditions at their work site is
Yes. Oh wait, but what was that first one? The first problem you just said?
health hazards.
Oh, thank you. Health hazards. So if we know health hazards, we could say something like the natural, physical, and psychological problems that are currently plaguing migrant farm workers, undocumented migrant farm workers. We could say something like the natural, physical, and psychological health problems that are affecting undocumented farm workers. And you could put in the claim if you wanted, like their proposition, you know. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say determines, but it's like because of those things, we need the legislation, if that makes sense. So we could even say something like the major health concerns that are arising within the conditions of migrant farm workers today is one of the needs for a revamp in policy. You could say something like natural, physical, and psychological health issues are one of the major problems that concern migrant farm workers today without the policy. Does that make sense? So there's a multiple different ways that anybody could have helped me with that word. Just as feel free to throw in a word if you see me struggling like that again. Or don't throw me a bone. I'll just come up with something else. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that what we need to do first is figure out what your problems are. What's the problem with the issue? What's your thesis?
The thesis is that the division between blacks and Africans come from the stereotypes and the cultural differences.
Remember when I was like, okay, but what do we want to do with that?
Yeah.
That's why. I think that we just need to get you to a place of policy. So much like Lisa and Quentin, you need to come up with your, like, what is it? Okay, think of that. And know that you need to come up with some problems. People are mental problems. Turn into the substance. What else are they doing? Dropping out of school! Which then what? Now they can't get a job, and now it's detrimental, and now they can't even be a part of things. It's just not fair. It's leading to the demise. Reason again for women's what? Overall inequities. How can I do anything else when I'm concentrating on what I look like all day long? It's like they want to keep us distracted so we don't go out and do something. I have a great t-shirt that said Mother Teresa didn't walk around complaining about her thighs. She had shit to do. It's true. Imagine all the shit we could be getting done if we weren't sitting here being told that we should worry about this all the time. Isn't that amazing? Why do I get in this class and I just have like random pains places? And I think of this like hunger. Again, my husband packed me. Did he pack me a snack? He has no time for me not eating.
So the problems that like we just listed, like dropping out of school and like substance abuse, that would be like your main body paragraphs.
Your first 3 paragraphs. Let's lay out, because you have to establish that there is a need. That's the first thing we have to do is establish that there's a need. So through that need, you're going to lay out all your problems and you're going to lay out the causes. Because within the causes, you're going to also reiterate the need. If there's no need, I don't want to get up off my butt and do anything. I don't want to vote for you if there's no need. So it's like with all these propositions right now, that's what people are going to be talking about. They're going to be listing out all of the problems that exist because that proposition isn't there. Marijuana, you want to legalize it? Make it happen. They're going to lay out all the problems. Why? Because the crime is an issue. Because drug cartels are making the money. Because we can't tax it and regulate it. Because it's not, because these old laws, I mean, the law that's like now, if you get caught with weed, you have to get caught with so much weed to even go to jail. It's crazy town. The law, as it is established on its own, suggests that that it shouldn't even be a law. Does that make sense? Like, if the law is such a BS law that you're like, okay, if I got cut with like, I don't know, something like 260 grams or something, and you're like, what? It's like a truckload of weed. If you have a truckload of weed, you're looking to sell weed, okay? So, like, yeah, that person should probably do something. That's like a big person. Somebody walking around with weed, they're like, okay, slap on the hand, move it along. It's like getting a P-Safe ticket. You're like, all right. Does that make sense? So that's why we have to establish that there is a need, that there's a problem to begin with. And you'll see that with any type of action. Right now, the presidential candidates, they're coming out and they are establishing that there is a problem. Well, at least the Republican candidate is very strongly suggesting that there is a problem and we need to fix it. So most of his time is spent laying out a need to do something. We're not getting a lot of the plan. He says he doesn't want to tell you. Keep it a secret. But otherwise, he lays out all the problems. And that's how we always see it. If you're going to buy a product, they're first going to tell you that a problem exists. Proactive commercials, they'll start with what? The clear skin? No, they're going to talk about how you were embarrassed and you couldn't go out. How you were constantly covering your face. How it was so hard. How you tried everything. Problem, problem, problem. There's a need, right? And now, here's your solution. Are you tired? Right. Does this make sense, y'all? Thanks for letting me eat while we go. So I hope that you all understand how this would like kind of work now. These are the body paragraphs and what they look like. They'll of course have an introduction and conclusion, but essentially this is the layout. Within each body paragraph, we will typically work on focusing the direction of the paper, which will be our telling part. This is where you tell us your topic sentence exactly what that paragraph is about. And I have a handout that will talk to you about telling and showing. Don't just tell us, show us. So how do we show? All of you are pretty good at this right now. This is where you give your evidence. This is how you prove that it is a problem. This is indeed where you show that this is in fact happening, where you give us some kind of representation statistically or testimony. You give all that data that goes along with it, and then you conclude and wrap it up. Does that make sense to you? That's how each paragraph will essentially go. So for the purpose of your assignment, if you wanted to, for your A's and your B's and your C's, if you wanted to write down a couple areas that you think you want to talk about, if you don't want to put A and B and C and that confuses you right now, you can simply put some bullet points and say, like, I'll talk about this topic and this topic and this topic within this main point. A lot of you have that laid out already. The key here is going to be your warrant, and that's a new part that we're going to be getting into. But your body paragraph organization, so just like it says and just like that structure was, you'll have a topic sentence, you'll have evidence and analysis that supports the claim you're making. The claim you're making is your topic sentence, and it provides reasoning as to why you see this problem existent to the situation or policy. So we'll review evidence and reasoning in the next couple weeks. And then there's this new thing called a warrant. So a warrant is important to your argument because it connects your reasoning and it supports your thesis. If none of that makes sense, how many of you talked about something called a warrant before, or a connector, or reasoning? Have you heard of any of these words in your argumentative papers before? Did nobody talk about claim, evidence, warrant, the Toolman method? How did you make arguments in AP English? Or in English class before? Did you make one? Or you just like, you should do it, because, thanks.
We just really wrote a lot of research papers. Yeah, it wasn't like
We didn't argue anything. We just wrote about books.
Well, good. I'm going to teach you this. This is, I think, one of the most critical parts about writing a persuasive message. It's speaking in the same way. There's something called reasoning, and we'll go over it in great detail. Your logos, right? This idea of logic. It's how you take your audience by the hand and you say, look, when you do this, then it leads to this, and then sometimes it leads to this, and this is why we have a problem. This is why we got to do something. It's pretty much what it's going to do. Or it suggests that if you believe this is essentially the same thing. So if you think this is right, you should probably think this was right, and that's why you should accept my conclusion. Or it's a type of reasoning like, this was what's going on, and this was the effect, and that's why we need to do something. So all these different types of reasoning that we talk about, but it's how we communicate about that to clearly show that what's the policy or what's going on in our world today, whatever the agency is, that's what's contributing to this issue. And that's why we need to step it up and do something. So many of you were having a hard time not making your informative speech persuasive because you kept wanting to take that step. That step is your warrant. You just didn't realize that. It's the same thing that you did within your introduction speech. I didn't want you to tell me about your parents unless they related to you. So you gave me like the evidence, but you can't assume that I'm inside your mind and I know that that evidence is exactly related to your parents. So your job is to make that connection for the audience. So you've already done this in your speech essentially. It's just working on it in a bit different way. This will come into play a lot more clearly when we go through it. Then we'll have our rebuttal section. This can all take place in one paragraph, typically. The opponent's argument, and then you'll talk about your counter-argument to that, or our disagreement, or what we want to refute, or how we can concede to part of it, but not the other part, and that's why we still need a policy. Because it's important that if somebody has a good point, you can concede to it and be like, that's an excellent point. However, but we still need to talk about why it won't work. Or part of it is good, but the other part isn't. Yeah, hon?
Since we're bringing up 3 problems, do we do a rebuttal for each problem?
No, because your rebuttals are not the same as the problems. Your rebuttals are the reasons as to why. So it'd be like, one of the main reasons why people want to defund Planned Parenthood is because the funds go to they believe the funds go to abortion. And then just leave it at that? Mm-mm. Contrary to popular belief, this is not entirely true. And let me show you how. And so then you bring up.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, do we not have a rebuttal for any of the problems? Do we come up with a different problem that we rebuttal? Like, that's what I'm talking
I think we're just rebuttaling the policy, right?
You are, yeah, so look at the format.
Yeah.
So if you look at this part here, it's like this is the rebuttal section. This is in essence where you bring up the reasons as to why people don't agree with you,
Oh.
the reasons why the policy exists. So this is your opposition. So
Okay, that makes sense.
the contrasting idea. Does that make sense? So those will be
Yeah.
completely two different things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. We will talk about this and we'll go over it in detail. I'll give you amazing transition words that you can even use. That sounds fun, but not so much. Any of those ways to go about refuting. And we can talk about that again in general. But then there is the final issue is for you to wrap up. The only thing that I would look to for your homework, if you're writing out that framework, is like give me 2 arguments maybe that people are suggesting. So for example, like that they think that it's for abortion, that they're not legal, so they don't deserve to be here. Bottom line. Like, okay, but they're working illegally, so they're still not anything, right? Or that they're taking, well, yeah, there's a lot of good counter arguments I guess we could make. That having a child is your choice. Right, Olivia? If you were to, yes, are you writing that down via your text message? So tell me, if we say like, well, having a baby is your own choice. Like, why do I need to take care of, like, why does my company need to pay for it? That's one of my counter arguments, right? Does that make sense, y'all? My family's not going to have a baby. Why do I have to pay for that baby? I'm just playing. I look really fun at playing devil's advocate. I'm really great at it. So if you want to play that game with me, I'm more than happy. And again, I only talk about it in the tone of my own debate style. Wrap up the conclusion that you've been discussing. This one's a bit different, and I have a handout for your introduction and conclusion as well when we get into the details of writing. I really just want you to understand the structure so you at least get a framework. But wrap up what you're discussing in a general way. So you can restate your proposition and why it's important. You can restate the main ideas, restate the refutation and explain. You can do all those things. You can call for propositions or future actions to take, which you should. Don't bring in new points